So imagine that when you were young, you had a traumatic experience involving a shoelace. And since then, you have struggled to tie your shoes. Whenever you go towards your shoes, you get like a freeze response that comes in. You start getting some negative self-talk. You're kind of stuttering and stumbling a bit. You're lacking confidence in the shoelace department. And it's a bit of an inconvenience. Now, when it comes to overcoming this issue, the standard approach that most people take is what you could call the top-down approach. It's trying to use their rationality and logic to convince themselves of all the reasons why they shouldn't be behaving the way they are. So they might come up with a big list of all the reasons why they shouldn't be afraid of tying their shoelaces, right? Or they might try and, say affirmations or somehow convince themselves, like, I can tie my shoelaces. I'm the best shoelace tire in the world. They might come up with all kinds of illogical beliefs that they find within themselves, and try and highlight them and become aware of them. And this is the top-down approach because it involves the top of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where the rationality and logical centers reside, right? And this is kind of how most people try and go through life, is trying to change their behavior with logic and rationality and reframe their beliefs and convince themselves that I shouldn't be worried about the interview tomorrow. There's no reason to be worried at all, right? Or I've got every right to go to this party. Why shouldn't I go to this party? I should just turn up. I don't care that Steve's there. Steve can fuck off. There's no reason why I should be feeling these feelings and feel worried about going, right? And this is also sometimes the approach taken in kind of talk therapy or things like CBT, where it's about identifying different beliefs and attempting to reframe them. And these has their place. Sometimes they're helpful, but the top-down approach really ultimately fails to deliver any long-term transformation because it's working at the wrong end of the problem. Because if we take our shoelace example, what's really happening at the root is not, or what's happening first is not the beliefs in the mind. What's happening first is the automatic survival responses of the nervous system, right? That freeze response that's kicking in order to immobilize the body to keep you safe. So when you were young, when that initial shoelace incident occurred, there was some threat perceived by the nervous system. So it instantly freezes to stay safe. But because that was too intense, because you couldn't stay present with it, you had to dissociate. It was just too much. And so that freeze energy stays latent in the system because it can't be integrated, it can't be metabolized. And it's lurking there just in a kind of always on state, waiting to kick in again and freeze should a similar threat arise. And the key point is that the automatic survival responses of the nervous system does not give a shit about what the mind, the narrative mind and logic and rationality thinks. It does not give a fuck. Okay? It will trump whatever the mind is saying every single time without fail. So you could spend days listing all the reasons why you shouldn't be afraid of your shoe and talk to all kinds of people and get your friends to give you moral support. And as soon as you go near that shoe, just whoosh, that freeze response, if you haven't dealt with that freeze response will come in. And it will immobilize you, and it'll in fact, when you're triggered in that way, parts of your brain actually shut down, right? Often the rational parts of your brain, which are very useful in general, not to dismiss them, they shut down, and you start operating solely or largely from these really instinctual survival responses. And so this is why we need bottom-up processing, right? Bottom-up processing is working with those responses of the autonomic nervous system, with the direct experience of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and your different emotions, sadness, shame, and so on. Because that's where the trauma lives. If we consider trauma to be this kind of like an emotional imprint from the past, like in the case of the shoelace and the freeze, there's this imprint of this freeze whenever you go near a shoe, right? And that's an emotional imprint that's living in your body. And so what you've got to do is you've got to learn how to bring attention to that emotional imprint and to let it play out, because it's been looping in the background your whole life. Every time you go near a shoe, it resurfaces, and then you know it's too much, so you push it back down again. And then it resurfaces, you push it back down again. And in fact, every time you're engaging in that top-down rationality, that's essentially a form of repression. The reason you're working out so hard to try and figure out the solution is because you don't want to feel that freeze. It feels really uncomfortable. It feels painful. So your mind is working overtime to figure out how you can get rid of it without actually having to go anywhere near it. But the only thing that this freeze response really needs is to be felt. It needs to be allowed and felt. And then if you can stay present and stay connected to that energy without pushing it down or letting it sort of explode, it starts to shift, it starts to change, it starts to metabolize. And then it begins to relax. And that's the nervous system going from threat mode to safety mode, right? At a deep level. That is when you start to resolve that problem. And then once you've metabolized that freeze, when you go near a shoe again or a shoelace and try and tie your shoes, that freeze response won't kick in because it's relaxed. And then you'll find that there's no beliefs to reframe. You don't need to reframe any beliefs. You don't have to worry about rationality or logic. You can just go and tie your shoelaces, right? Because when it comes to tying your shoelaces, most people, they have no beliefs one way or the other. They don't believe that they're good at tying their shoelaces. They don't believe they're bad at tying their shoelaces. They don't believe that they need to get better at tying their shoelaces. Like, they just go and tie their shoelaces. Like, rather than having to reframe your beliefs around something, the best situation is just to have no beliefs about something and then just to do it in a very free, spontaneous fashion without any sort of mental maps or cognitive frameworks around what you're doing. And you can see this in, many other areas of your life that, just in my experience, I tried for many years to intellectually rationalize my way out of all my problems. I read tons of books, psychology, philosophy. I journaled like a madman. Trying to come up with all the insights into my psychology. And I just became more and more of an alcoholic. It was an expression of my pain. It was, if anything, it was driving it deeper. And the pain was just deeply held chunks of survival stress and repressed emotions in my body. And nothing changed. My life just got worse and more painful until I started working directly with those energies in the body. And then my nervous system that had hundreds of patterns in it, which were just like threat, danger, don't move, don't say anything, freeze, hide. These parts start relaxing, and it felt like there were fires going out of my body. Like I could just physically feel the fires being quenched, and just a sense of relaxation coming in, and spaciousness and lightness. That just, as I kept working through more and more layers from the bottom up, then as well, those layers of tension relax, and then the mind starts to relax as well. It's a natural consequence of the layers of tension in the nervous system relaxing. Then you don't need to worry about the mind going into overdrive, because it just relaxes by itself, because the body comes first. So, if you're looking to feel calmer, happier, more relaxed, more authentic, more spontaneous, natural, all that good stuff that comes from a well-regulated nervous system, start from the bottom up, start with the body, then the mind will follow. So the stepping out of trying to rationalize and intellectualize, That will never work because it's not where the problem is. The problem is not in the mind, although the mind can be useful and it can be helpful to have a cognitive framework for what's going on within your body. Trying to rationalize your way out will never work. More than just limited little benefits here and there. To really transform, start from the bottom up. Peace out.